as an artist, you hope for that when you get to do a film or tell a story. And so when you say these years and the amount of people that I've met.
Keanu Reeves is one of those rare stars who feels both untouchable and deeply familiar. The kind of actor people cheer for not just because of the movies, but because of the man behind them. We see the blockbuster hero, Neo dodging bullets, John Wick taking on impossible odds. But few know the winding road that got him there. It's a story that starts with a restless childhood, carries through friendships that ended far too soon, and leads into losses so heavy most people would never recover. And yet, somehow, Keanu keeps moving forward. So what really shaped him into Hollywood's most unlikely hero? That's the journey we're about to get into, a nomad's childhood. Let's start at the very beginning, because to really understand the heartbreaking tragedies of Keanu Reeves, you have to see the world he was born into. A world that was beautiful in some ways, chaotic in others, and full of challenges that would shape the man we know today. It was September 2nd, 1964, in Beirut, Lebanon, a city with a history stretching back thousands of years, full of beauty, culture, and, at the time, simmering tensions that mirrored the chaos that would later enter Keanu's life. That day, Patricia Taylor, an English performer and costume designer, gave birth to her second child, Keanu Charles Reeves. His father, Samuel Nowlin Reeves, was a geologist with Hawaiian and Chinese roots, a man whose curiosity about the world was boundless, but whose presence in Keanu's life was fleeting at best. Keanu's name, by the way, means cool breeze over the mountains in Hawaiian, which sounds serene, poetic even, but little Keanu's life was anything but calm. By the time Keanu was 3, his parents' marriage had ended. Samuel disappeared from the picture entirely. No calls, no letters, just silence, leaving young Keanu with a father-shaped hole he wouldn't revisit until he was 13. And even then, their interactions were brief, awkward, and tinged with distance. He was always moving, Keanu would later say in a rare interview. Geology? Adventure? I guess I inherited the restlessness, but being restless is different from being abandoned, and that early absence left deep marks. Patricia didn't stay put either. She packed up Keanu and his older sister Kim and moved them across continents like nomads. Australia, New York, Toronto, the family bounced from city to city, from school to school, never staying long enough for roots to take hold. Between ages 6 and 16, Keanu attended 4 different high schools in 5 years, a kind of constant instability that no kid should have to navigate. And then came the extra layer of struggle: dyslexia. Diagnosed at around 6, Keanu's brain scrambled letters and words in ways that made school feel like an obstacle course designed to break him. Reading was a nightmare, and spelling was an ongoing battle. "School was very hard for me," he admitted in a 2005 interview with Handbag magazine. "I didn't finish high school. I got kicked out of 4 schools in 5 years." On top of moving constantly, he was bullied for his struggles and labeled lazy by teachers who didn't understand dyslexia, a double blow that could have crushed anyone. But Keanu found escapes where he could. Sports, mostly. And hockey became his outlet. He played goalie with intensity, diving and sliding on the ice in ways that hinted at the resilience he'd carry into adulthood. He even considered an NHL path, until a shoulder dislocation at 15 derailed that dream. Injuries aside, the thrill of performance and being in front of an audience was calling him elsewhere. Acting became his new arena, and he found early opportunities at 15, landing a TV commercial for a Canadian cereal. By the time he was 20, he was starring in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, playing a goofy, time-traveling teen who charmed audiences worldwide. Dyslexia didn't disappear, but it didn't define him either. And yet, for every laugh on screen, there were private battles, early fame, constant relocation, and a childhood punctuated by loss, instability, and the sense that life was always just out of reach. First loss, heartbreak behind the spotlight. The 80s and 90s were a whirlwind for Keanu Reeves, a period where his career soared so fast it could almost blind you if you weren't paying attention. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure in 1989 made him a teen idol almost overnight. Who doesn't love a guy who travels through time, hangs out with Socrates and Napoleon, and somehow makes history class feel like a wild ride? It was goofy, it was fun, and it introduced audiences to a young actor who could blend charm, awkwardness, and surprisingly heartfelt moments all at once. By 1991, Keanu stepped into Point Break, playing an undercover FBI agent tangled with a crew of adrenaline-seeking surfer bank robbers, and critics suddenly noticed a depth to his work that went beyond the teen comedy appeal. His performance was described as earnest, brooding, with eyes that seemed to hold oceans of unspoken emotion. And the box office numbers backed it up. Over $43 million on a $24 million budget. Hollywood was paying attention, and the phone started ringing with bigger scripts and more intense roles. But fame has a way of showing you that success has teeth, and Keanu quickly learned that early on. One of the first big blows came through River Phoenix, his close friend and co-star on My Own Private Idaho, in 1991. A film that explored a raw road trip story of friendship, desire, and searching for identity. River was that golden boy of the era, son of hippie parents, brother to Joaquin, the type of person whose energy lit up every room he walked into. Keanu and River bonded over motorcycles, late-night jam sessions, and confessions that seemed too heavy for teenagers. River was like a brother, Keanu said years later. Pure light. Then came October 31, 1993, a Halloween night that still echoes in his memories. The Viper Room on the Sunset Strip, a club Keanu co-owned with River and a few friends, was packed, buzzing with music and chatter. But outside, River, just 23, collapsed. He had overdosed on a dangerous mix of heroin and cocaine. And Keanu was there as paramedics tried to save him, whispering pleas and trying to keep him conscious, knowing deep down it was too late. The autopsy would confirm an accidental overdose, and the world mourned. Headlines screamed about the tragic death of a child star. But for Keanu, it wasn't about headlines. It was the emptiness River left behind, the hole in his life that wouldn't stop echoing. He retreated, didn't lean on therapy, dabbled briefly in numbing with substances, but mostly he rode literal motorcycles, tearing up the Pacific Coast Highway on a 70s Norton Commando, pushing speed and wind into his grief. "Grief turns you inside out," he said in a 2006 interview with The Guardian. You think, why me? But then you realize, why not? Work became another kind of therapy. Speed in 1994, a film about a bus rigged to explode if it slowed below 50 miles per hour, made over $350 million worldwide, cementing his action star credentials. Then came The Matrix in 1999, where Keanu became Neo, the One, and the film's revolutionary bullet time effects weren't the only thing people noticed. It was his quiet, intense energy, the way he could carry entire scenes with a glance or a pause. By 35, he was on top of the world professionally, but happiness in his personal life was still elusive. When life turned upside down. By the late 1990s, Keanu Reeves was riding a career high. After films like Speed and The Matrix, he wasn't just another actor in Hollywood, he was the guy studios trusted to carry blockbusters. But behind all the red carpets and premieres, his personal life was quietly shifting in ways no one could predict. Around 1998, Keanu's band Dogstar was still doing shows and putting out music. And it was during a music video shoot that he crossed paths with Jennifer Syme. She wasn't some wide-eyed fan, she was a music executive, someone who knew the industry inside out. And she had this sharp, soulful personality that instantly clicked with Keanu's quiet, thoughtful energy. They started seeing each other, and before long, what began as a spark grew into something deeper. By 1999, the couple was expecting a baby. For someone like Keanu, who had spent much of his adult life labeled as Hollywood's eternal bachelor, this was a whole new chapter. Friends later recalled how excited he was about becoming a dad, how he talked about all the little things he was looking forward to. Teaching his child how to ride a bike, playing music together, just being present in ways he sometimes wished his own father had been. In interviews years later, he admitted, "I wanted to be a dad more than anything." But then, on December 24, 1999, what should have been the happiest moment turned into something no parent ever wants to experience. Keanu and Jennifer, 8 months along in the pregnancy, went into the hospital full of anticipation. Their daughter, Ava Archer Syme Reeves, was stillborn. Doctors explained it was a cord accident, something no one could have prevented. But explanations don't soften the blow of such a loss. Keanu held his baby girl, singing Hawaiian lullabies his own father had once sung to him, while Jennifer, shattered and inconsolable, struggled to even process what had just happened. The world didn't really know about this at the time. Keanu and Jennifer kept the grief mostly private, shielding themselves from tabloids and the relentless Hollywood spotlight. For them, it wasn't a headline, it was an apocalypse that unfolded quietly in the hospital room. Later, when Keanu spoke to Parade magazine, he said, "I miss her every day. It's like a hole in your chest." The pain of losing Ava also put strain on their relationship. They tried to navigate it together, but grief doesn't always follow neat timelines, and eventually they separated. Yet, even apart, they remained connected. Not exactly a couple, not exactly friends, but something in between, still tied together by love, and the memory of the daughter they never got to raise. For Keanu, work became both a distraction and an outlet. As he stepped into the role of Neo again for the Matrix sequels, some fans noticed a kind of heaviness in his performances, as though the character's sacrifices and burdens reflected parts of his own life. Keanu once mentioned that a phrase stuck with him during those years: "Grief is love with no place to go." It was something he carried into his roles, and audiences, even without knowing the full story, could feel that depth on screen. But the heartbreak didn't stop there. Just 18 months later, on April 2, 2001, Jennifer was driving home from a party in her Jeep Cherokee. Whether she was distracted or maybe just too tired to be on the road, no one really knows. But her car veered off Mulholland Drive, flipped, and she was thrown from the vehicle. Jennifer was only 28. Keanu was the one who had to identify her body, the same woman who had once been the center of his dreams of family. In an interview with Rolling Stone, he put it simply, "I wake up and it hits me. She's not here." Think about that for a second. 2 devastating losses within 18 months. First his daughter, then Jennifer. It's the kind of grief most people can't even imagine carrying. And for Keanu, it nearly broke him. He admitted years later that those were some of the darkest times in his life. He struggled with insomnia, lost weight, and withdrew into himself. He even sold his share of the Viper Room, the club tied to so many painful memories, and threw himself deeper into motorcycles. Riding fast and dangerously almost became a habit, and he survived more than a few close calls on the road. In a 2014 interview with Esquire, he admitted bluntly, "I didn't want to be here." And then there was his sister, Kim Reeves. She had been battling leukemia since 1991, and Keanu threw himself into helping her however he could. He quietly donated millions to leukemia research, reportedly around $4 million, and even paid for private jets to get her to treatments without the stress of travel. "She's my hero," he said once. In 2003, Kim went into remission, but the scare had left its mark, reminding Keanu that life and family were fragile things. All of this, River Phoenix's death, the loss of Ava, Jennifer's accident, his sister's illness, piled up over the years, and by the early 2000s, Keanu was facing a battle with depression that he didn't sugarcoat. Keanu's struggles with the dark years. The early 2000s were some of the hardest years of Keanu's life. Between 2001 and 2003, he admitted that he felt like a ghost, just moving through the days without really being present. Friends around him worried, because certain dates hit him like a truck. The anniversary of River Phoenix's passing, or what would have been his daughter Ava's birthdays. Those weren't just moments on a calendar. They were reminders of everything he had lost, and they had a way of pulling him under, no matter how busy his schedule seemed. He wasn't the type to open up much about relationships during that time, but he did quietly date. And years later, in 2019, the world learned about his partnership with artist Alexandra Grant. She brought him a kind of calm that people around him noticed. But even then, he was still very protective of his vulnerability and rarely put it on display. When he finally spoke about his depression, he didn't dress it up. He once described it as feeling like you were drowning in black water. He admitted that suicidal thoughts crossed his mind, but he quickly reminded himself that life was too precious to throw away on what-ifs. Instead of giving in, he poured his energy into work. That's how films like Constantine in 2005 came about, with its themes of inner battles and demons that mirrored some of his own. The cost of a lifetime in action. By the time the 2010s rolled around, Keanu Reeves had done something pretty remarkable. He had reinvented himself in a way that very few actors ever manage. The John Wick franchise, which first hit theaters in 2014, gave him a brand new identity on screen. The character of Wick, a grieving, relentless, unstoppable figure, was almost like a mirror of the man playing him. The film had a modest budget of around $20 million, but it ended up pulling in more than $80 million worldwide. The sequels didn't just perform well, they exploded, bringing in billions and turning Keanu into one of the most bankable action stars in the world again. But here's the thing, a lot of people don't realize. Every cool move, every flip, every gunfight that fans cheer for has a price tag, and that price tag is usually paid in pain. Keanu doesn't just show up and let stunt doubles handle the heavy lifting. He trains hard. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, firearms practice, weight training, the whole package. As he's put it himself, his body is his instrument. And like any instrument played too hard for too long, it begins to wear down. The injuries started to stack up years ago. Back in 2006, while filming The Lake House, he suffered a ruptured cervical disc. Then in 2014, right as the first John Wick was coming together, he broke an ankle on set. And during some of the later Matrix reshoots, around 2017, he strained his neck badly enough that it made headlines. He tended to laugh these things off, calling them occupational hazards, but anyone watching closely could see the toll was cumulative. Fast forward to 2024, and Keanu revealed one of his worst injuries yet. And strangely enough, it didn't even happen while shooting a fight scene. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, he described how, while filming a comedy called Good Fortune with Aziz Ansari and Seth Rogen, he managed to snap his kneecap in a freak accident. He explained the whole thing later on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The cast had been doing a scene in a cold plunge, and when the cameras stopped rolling, Keanu wrapped himself in a towel and started doing what he called the cold shuffle, that funny little walk you do when you're freezing. But then his foot caught in a gap in the protective carpet, and while the rest of his body moved, his knee didn't. In his words, it was like slow motion. He fell, and his patella cracked like a potato chip. That meant surgery, followed by a long stretch of rehab. Suddenly, there were paparazzi shots of Keanu looking thinner, moving stiffly, sometimes even limping, and the rumor mill went into overdrive. Some fans worried he was secretly battling something more serious, like cancer, while others speculated about a relapse into old habits. The reality was less sensational, but no less tough. His body had simply been pushed to its limit after decades of punishment. Then came March of 2025. While promoting Sonic the Hedgehog 3, where he voices Shadow, a fitting choice since Shadow is a brooding anti-hero with a complicated backstory, Keanu sat in front of the press and finally admitted the truth. At 60 years old, he said, his knees were done. Doctors had told him there was permanent damage. The flips and the hard landings that defined his action career were no longer possible. It wasn't a retirement speech, but it was a moment of honesty that felt like one. Fans in the room were stunned, and when the clip hit the internet, it went everywhere. Within 24 hours, it had 50 million views, and hashtags like Pray for Keanu were trending worldwide. So, what comes next for Keanu Reeves? That's the open question. There may not be more high-octane John Wick stunts, but there are plenty of other directions. He's already dipped into voice acting, and his turn, as Shadow suggests, there could be more animated roles in his future. Theater has also come calling. In September of 2025, he debuted on Broadway in Waiting for Godot alongside Alex Winter, and audiences gave him standing ovations. He's also producing documentaries, like one focused on martial arts legend Benny Urquidez, and he's still making music with his band Dogstar. Behind the scenes, though, the toll of all those years in action films lingers. Chronic arthritis is now part of his daily life, and while he shrugs it off by comparing it to grief, saying pain is something you adapt to, it's clear that the body that carried him through decades of intense work has limits now, and that's where Keanu's story sits today. At a crossroads, where the legend of his on-screen roles intersects with the reality of hidden wounds that fans are only just beginning to understand. Tell us in the comments what moment touched you the most, and make sure to subscribe to explore more untold stories behind the world's most fascinating celebrities.